Hey, Halsey, thank you so much for making yourself available.
Happy to be here.
Yes, you and I were connected by our mutual friend Tom Luongo, who suggested I
Great
have
man.
you on. Yeah, great man, very very great sweary man as well. I have a lot of fun
Hmm.
with Tom. I've learned a lot from him, and I'm hoping to learn a lot from you. And one of the things you said that you're particularly interested in is politics and also the Middle East politics.
Hmm.
And I'm curious about your take and how you see how things are playing out in the Middle East, the Gaza peace plan,
Hmm.
what's happening with Qatar and Julani. Where do you want to begin?
So let's back up for a minute. When we're talking about the Middle East peace plan,
Mm,
okay, the Middle East peace plan as of right now is a stopgap. There's no future for it in terms of how it's going to affect the countries of the Middle East. Why? Because the section of Gaza that's still under control of the Palestinians is probably smaller than the area of London. Okay. And the West Bank itself is such a small area of land itself, even without any of the quote unquote settlers there, that creating a state in those areas is completely unviable. Okay. And when I say unviable, I don't mean unviable in terms of that they'll be fighting forever. I mean, there's not enough water, there's not enough resources. The only port that the internal Palestinian state could have would be Gaza. And that's if they're connected by some kind of land bridge. Otherwise, they're totally landlocked
mm,
between Jordan and Israel, who both are not going to allow a complete free trade zone between the two. Remember, Israel's about the size of New Jersey. Okay. And that's with the West Bank and Gaza. So when you talk about a Palestinian state in those areas, you're not talking about a state. You're talking about an autonomous zone.
right.
So if you want to call it for what it is, that it's going to be a Palestinian autonomous zone, then it has to be talked about that way. It has to be talked about where is the responsibility going to lie between the Jordanians, the Israelis, and the Palestinians. You have to talk about how is land going to be allocated, how is there going to be resources allocated, because when you drill into the ground for water, it doesn't matter if it's right under you, if it's affecting everyone around you. If Jordan, Israel, and the Palestinian areas all get water from the same source, it doesn't matter who's putting the pipe in. It's still affecting all three. When you're talking about commerce that involves ports or involves transportation through sovereign land, you're talking about agreements that have to be bilateral. They can't be unilateral,
Okay.
right? So when you talk about a peace plan, what you're really talking about as of right now is a ceasefire. Okay, there's just an agreement that both sides are going to stop shooting at each other for a little bit. And we've seen that that's probably not the best way forward for all parties involved, regardless of which side you sit on. That just getting them not to kill each other is a good first step, but it's not in any way going to lead to a solving of the problem.
Yeah.
So the question is, when are and this is why I said I might not have traditional views on everything. When are the adults going to sit down and start evaluating the problem for what it is, right? Like if you want to look at, let's say,
Mm,
historical Palestine in terms of the British mandate included both Jordan and Israel. Okay, that's a huge area of land. Most of Israel south, the Negev Desert, and below is completely unpopulated. Most of Jordan is completely unpopulated. The only areas that seem to be argued about are the ones where everybody is, where the ones that if you divide them are completely unviable towards each other. But there's enough land where everyone could come together and decide this is the place where the Palestinians are going to be, this is the place where the Israelis are, and this is where the final border would be. And whether everyone agrees to it or not, it could be enforced if necessary. But the idea that there has to be a creation of an entity called Palestine within Israel proper, which, as I said, will be completely unviable and will lead to further bloodshed one way or the other, especially as one will not be ever truly sovereign. I mean, you've heard the discussions. The discussions always revolve around that a Palestinian state will be completely demilitarized, that they won't have control over the borders, that Israel will maintain control over the borders. That's not a state.
no.
That's an autonomous zone. And I haven't heard any Palestinian leadership talking about being okay with an autonomous zone. I haven't heard of any Israeli leaders talking about being okay with an autonomous zone. So that being said, when are the adults going to sit down and decide that if something is going to be done about the Palestinians, that they're going to put forth some solid proposals of a viable alternative to what's on the table right now? And no one's doing that. So my belief is that we're just going to see extended bloodshed as long as this limbo is maintained.
Yes. No, thank you, Halsey. Thank you. And um, October the 7th, was it 2 years ago? It started 2023.
A little more than that, yeah.
Yeah, in December of that year, 2023, I interviewed a rabbi from
Hmm.
an Orthodox group in London. And I was,
They're called Natura Carta. Just so you know, they're not very accepted amongst general Orthodox. In fact, they're condemned by almost all of them. But I do know who you're talking about.
Right, right. And I'm not sure if that was the name that they gave themselves, but they're Hasidic Jews that live in
Hmm.
North London. And I met with, he said, I'll interview you, but not over Zoom, in person. So I
Hmm.
met him in London. He was the one wearing the Palestine badge, not me. And then I
Hmm.
asked him, I said, well, what's your solution? And he said, one state where
Hmm.
people, where Jew and Muslim live side, Jew, Muslim, and Christian live side by side. I'm paraphrasing here, live side by side
Hmm.
as they did before the creation of Israel. And he said, as Jews and Muslims are living side by side in Iran, one state that recognizes all people. And then it seems to me,
It's been tried twice, and both times it failed miserably. That you have the Jews in Iran, which are a minority of minority. I think there's 19,000 Jews in the whole
he,
country of 30 million people.
he said to me 30,000,
Okay,
30,000.
30,000 in a country of, I think it's 30 or 40 million people.
Yeah.
So that's not even a minority. That's a statistical anomaly. But the place that it's really been tried is in Lebanon. In Lebanon, the Maronite Christians were firmly in charge, both demographically and politically, of the country. And as they allowed for Muslim integration and one state under both people, and then demographics started to shift in terms of the Muslims, the Maronite Christians became and not only a minority, but a horribly oppressed minority. And now you've had a failed state. You have a state where every side hates each other.
Mm.
Hezbollah has been for years been able to exert enormous political control because of outside backing, and you have no legitimate way forward for a true government of Lebanon to represent the people of Lebanon without being completely adherent to one of the three factions, which are the Alawites, the Shiite Muslims, and the Maronite Christians.
Right.
So you basically have a failed state that is probably going to be resolved at some point through bloodshed. That one group is going to exert dominance over the other two through bloodshed. So, and until then, everyone's going to keep starving and suffering and dealing with civil war and all of that. So it's not a viable solution to just say, hey, can't everyone just get along and live under one state? It's just not.
It would be nice, right? But
Everything would be nice if we could do
what you're
that.
saying
But
there, what you're saying there, right, to me speaks to the deliberate mess created by the British and the French when they,
and the Soviets, it was the British, French, and Soviets.
I didn't know about the Soviets, and when they created when they destroyed the Ottoman Empire, and then they divided it up, like for example, Kurdistan, instead of creating a discrete Kurdistan nation, allowing for that,
Hmm.
Kurdistan is split
But
between
wait, do you
Iraq,
have a
Turkey,
problem
and
with that?
Syria. Sorry,
Do you have a problem with that?
I
I'm
don't
curious. I'm
know.
not asking you to start an argument. I'm curious.
No. My read of it is it's what the British have done everywhere. They leave this
Hmm.
festering sore in that they can then use to shit stir, to have people fighting each other, to make it easier for them to continue plundering the resources and not allow
Sure.
people to unite against their imperial oppressors. So it
I agree
serves
with
that
that
purpose.
100%. I'm a big fan of a free Kurdistan, though, just so you know.
Right, right,
So,
right. It's just that because then they can stoke up MI6 or whoever their proxies can stoke up sectarian conflict in Turkey, in Iraq, in Syria, whenever it serves them, and people never unite. Like take for example Northern Ireland, like Protestants and Catholics can't live together. Seriously,
mhm,
it happens all over Europe. They live together. It happens on the mainland. They live together, but they leave it as
mhm,
a festering sore.
mhm.
Is my
You
take
know
on it.
why? Because they leave hope. That's how they leave it as a festering sore.
How
They
do
let
you?
all of these groups think that sooner or later they're going to achieve everything they've been fighting for over however many decades. And therefore, they give that hope that if they ever agree to a solution, that they'll be giving up on their dream and they'll be literally subservient themselves to whoever they hate.
Right.
And then they foster that hate by constantly supporting policies that don't allow anyone to ever talk,
Yeah.
right? And by doing so, like you said, they're able to make sure that the resources that they want are always available because they can always take one side over the other, and that loyalty to that side will get them the resources that they want. And this is something they've been doing even before the British Mandate of Palestine. So
Yeah.
that's not new,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, and it's tragic and horrible and horrific, and ordinary people pay the price, right? And then
Hmm.
and then we have this. It seems insoluble that it's not going to get resolved because, as Martin Armstrong says, and it makes complete sense to me, that the people's tribal loyalties to religion and culture and language go deep, generations deep.
I always tell this story. You'll find this interesting because never in my life would I give him credit for anything because the guy was such a blithering buffoon. But you know how they say a broken clock is right once a day, twice a day? So there was a man in the U.S. Senate who, right after the American invasion of Iraq the first time back in the 90s, when everyone was saying, what is the solution? What do we do to stop the massacres, to stop the violence, to get Iraq under control, where it's not just being sanctioned and everybody starving and all of this stuff, right? And this guy said, oh, that's obvious. You separate it into three countries, Sunni, Shiite, and Kurd, right? And he got laughed out of the room, literally laughed out of the room. You know who that was? Joe Biden.
Oh, this is before he got dementia, right? Before he got
Yeah, before he got dementia, he was just as much of a retard as he was after he got dementia. He might even have been better after he got dementia. He's always been a clown. But I'm just saying he was the only one who said it and he got laughed out of the room. And as of now, if you ask anyone, if we could go back in time and do it different, how would we do it? They'd say, "Oh, you would divide Iraq into three areas: Sunni, Shiite, and Kurd."
Yeah.
Right? Because that's where they're all killing each other. That's why ISIS is able to get a stronghold, is because these three tribes are always killing each other. If we just divide them up and let them have their own part of the country, which was a made up country to begin with, there's no historical Iraq. You know what I'm saying? It was always a tribal thing. And if you think about it now, you think, wow, the man was a genius. Now, don't get me wrong, I am not calling Joe Biden a genius. But remember, broken clock is right twice a day.
But in
But
his instance, perhaps just the once. It was right
yeah,
once.
it was right once a day. He was on military time, right? But
Okay. Well,
but
then the other thing for me is, I would say, is the tragedy of Israel.
mhm.
That from my read of it, Israel is it can't sustain itself. It's got a tiny population. My understanding is it's suffered economically and industrially because of the war. The people are exhausted from my read of the stuff, right? And it's surrounded by neighbors that it's pissed off and who are pissed off with it.
um,
Who
I
are
don't know if
pissed
I'd
off
agree
with
with
it.
that assessment, but go
Okay,
ahead.
but hostile neighbors.
I wouldn't go that far. Egypt and Jordan aren't hostile. They haven't been hostile
The
in
people are.
30, 40 years.
The
Eh,
the people are.
saying the people is meaningless in a place that doesn't have real democracy. Like the people do what the leadership says,
Okay, but
you know.
my concern is that people will conflate anti-Zionism with anti-Judaism,
Sure.
right? And then who when if there's blowback or whatever, who will get it in the neck will be the Jews, and the Jews aren't Zionists. Some are, some aren't. Just like not all Muslims are supporters of ISIS and Taliban and stuff, right?
Hmm.
So
But when it comes down to it, right? If there's, let's say, I don't know, country blah blah blah, right? Let's not use a real world example. Let's just, because I don't want to be able to say like, oh well, this sectarian group or whatever. Let's just say
right,
there's a Muslim country out there, and one of their neighbors decides we hate Muslims, we're going to go in and just wipe them out, right? Muslims, whether they're Shiite, Sunni, or any of the other branches of Islam, are going to say this is horrible, right? And they're going to say you shouldn't just be wiping out people because they're Muslims. The problem is that's what happens with Zionists, is that you can say, oh, well, there's some people that are Zionists, there's some people that are not, but you're still talking about just in the country of Israel, which where I would say 99% are Zionists, right? You're talking about 7 million people. Like it's there can't be a war against Zionism and not include the general Jewish population anyway, even if they would rather not be included in that classification. So, and what you'll find is that I don't want to give a number because I don't know. I've never done a study on it. A vast majority of the anti-Zionists are not anti-Zionists. They're just not interested in Jewish politics at all. They don't even really consider themselves Jewish. They consider themselves either progressives or they consider themselves wherever their home nation is. Like Judaism might be a religion to them that they don't follow, but they don't consider themselves to be Jewish for any intent and purposes except for politics. And that's a problem because they don't have to live with the consequences of their actions, whereas the other ones do, right? Because if let's say the anti-Zionist Jews, as I said, which they're a very small minority in the first place, but let's say they got their way and Israel was taken off the map, that it was now like we were talking about one state for everybody and blah blah blah. It would still be them that feels the blowback because that wouldn't be enough for most people. There's no point where the enemies of Israel are just going to say, "Okay, cool, let's go home. Like we've done what we needed to do. Let's go home." This is Hatfield McCoy. This is blood feud. This isn't something that gets resolved by a simple "let's talk and figure."
if you're in the UK, actually anywhere, get a VPN. If you want to be able to access all sorts of perspectives that the government thinks are dangerous for you, get a VPN. NordVPN.com/crypto rich.
This out. There has to be a resolution in which one side is considered the winner and one side is considered the loser. And that could be a thing where it winds up very good for them. Look at Germany, right? After World War II, they were the loser. Half the country was under Soviet occupation. Things did not go well for them right away. Now Germany is the powerhouse of the EU. They're probably arguably the best economy in Europe, right? They have their problems. Don't get me wrong. I'm not speaking as if Germany is the promised land, but I'm saying that when there was a winner and a loser, and one side was able to dictate terms to the other of how things were going to go forward, Germany became much more stable. It became much more proper, and it became much more free because of that time that they took in order to accept that war was not going to accomplish their goal.
Right.
Now, so I'm not saying that you have to be pro-Israel on this side or pro-Palestine or pro anything, but what I'm saying is that there never has been a time in the history of the state of Israel where one side was the winner and one side was the loser. What you had was two people who fought to a ceasefire. Always. Every one of the wars you talk about, every one of the conflicts have always ended in a ceasefire that was imposed on the outside. There was never a time where one side clearly won and one side clearly lost. And
And accepted their loss as well, because then
right,
that would be that would lead to what you're saying, like what happened with Germany. They accepted their loss of the Second World War. Okay,
mhm.
that's fine. We're going to put our energies elsewhere.
Now, you see, there is a sort of example. Now, this wasn't done through war, okay, just so you know. So there is differences. But when you look at Saudi Arabia, when you look at the United Arab Emirates, when you look at Bahrain, when you look at most of the Gulf states, I'm leaving Qatar out on purpose. Qatar is us, just so you know. Qatar is us in Britain, the U.S. in Britain. Qatar is not a real country. It's a shit stain on the Middle East. There's 300,000 countrymen
Just,
who are controlled by the bases of MI6 and the U.S. government.
just
Let's
so
not
you know,
pretend that there's.
I spent 4 years working in Qatar,
Mhm.
right? And also the slight diversion. Americans generally pronounce it Qatar. English pronounce it no. Americans say Qatar. British say
Mhm.
Qatar. In Arabic, Qatar. But anyway,
Yeah, I say Qatar. So
Qatar.
I split the baby, but but when you look at the Gulf states, right, they have been fighting an eternal war with the radical side of Islam for a lot of years. That war is basically over. Now, if you look at it, those countries are not only committed to modernization, but they're more anti-Islamic terrorists than the West is. They treat Islamic terrorism right now in the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia and places like that with an instant death sentence. The Muslim Brotherhood is outlawed in all of those countries, right? And the majority of the radical youth that existed in those countries that were fostered by those countries, don't get me wrong. It was a very good distraction while they were looting all the oil wealth of those countries, right? They basically have sent them to Europe. So those resources of radical Islam, and now don't get me wrong, it exists, just like it exists anywhere where you have a strong religious bent on any religion. You're going to have radicals. But what I'm saying is they're committed to modernization, and they're committed to using the wealth to build up the countries because they realize that stoking religious fire is not going to keep working, right? So you've seen that they fought a war where they decided that they were going to go for a Islamic caliphate throughout the world. They realized they lost, and they're allowing the West to kind of dictate terms. And as I said, it's been good for them. Like most people ignore it. In 2016, when Trump came to office, right, he spent $3.5 billion on the Counterterrorism Financing Center in Saudi Arabia. It was reported, but very, very mildly. Like you didn't see it everywhere, front page. And he considers this a huge, huge, huge accomplishment because the Gulf states chipped in just as much. This was not to fight just who are the terrorists, it was to track their money, right? Where are they being funded from? Where are they shuffling money to? What organizations and what industries are they co-opting in order to fund these radical movements throughout the world? And they've been silently shutting them down one by one. That's why lately that whenever you hear of a country getting really pissed off at someone, they declare them foreign terrorist organizations as opposed to just declaring a war on them, like Trump did with the cartels, Trump did with Nicolas Maduro. It's not because he just wants to take them out. He wants to take out their money. When you take out their money, they have no power, right? Because it's not just their state money that they get, it's their illicit money that they move around. So what he's been able to accomplish by doing this, and what the Gulf states have been able to accomplish by doing this, is really big news that people don't report on. And I think they don't report on it because of biases. because obviously you don't want to say that Saudi Arabia is doing a good job when the Democrats hate them and always have, and the Republicans consider them to be hotbeds of Islamic radicalism. So why would you ever want to talk about how great they're doing? You know what I'm saying? And even possibly radicalize their local populations.
And I certainly
So,
definitely don't want to say that Trump is doing a good job. And I wonder if, the funding ultimately leads back to the City of London. And
which it does.
right, okay, I
Hmm.
suspect it. And MI6 and its proxies and everything doing all of that.
Hmm.
So then, and then given the City of London's hold on the BBC as now
Hmm.
a general catch-all term for the for the mainstream media, well, they're not going to promote that idea either,
Of
because
course not.
it's going to undermine how the British imperial elites have been trying to keep a grip on access to collateral and resources in other lands.
Well, think about it. Since the end of World War II, Britain and France have maintained the west of, meaning America, and the east of the Soviet Union at a perpetual state of proxy war with each other all over the world. And every time you think we're getting out of it, we just get thrown right back into it, right? Like all of a sudden, Putin and Ukraine start acting up out of nowhere. And no matter what we do to try to achieve peace between the two of them, there's Britain and France telling, nope, we'll fight to the last drop of their blood. You
Yeah,
know what I'm saying? That when it seems like the war in Palestine, Israel is finally coming to an end and that Trump has some sort of plan for the future, there's Britain and France. Nope, we're going to recognize this fictional state of Palestine that nobody else does and cause a whole bunch of trouble between the two of them and give them a reason not to go forward. Same thing with all of the other proxy wars that go on through the Middle East. Now, that was what the real accomplishment of the war was after 10/7, right? It wasn't the war between Israel and Gaza. Okay, that was inevitable. It was going to happen. I don't know what the solution is, to tell you the truth. I wish I did. I wish I could tell you, oh, they're just going to do X and it'll be fine. But I don't know what the solution is. I do know that that area is basically uninhabitable for the next 10 to 15 years between clearing up the rubble and the unexploded ordnance. And anybody who thinks that they're doing the right thing by telling the Palestinians to live there in tents for the next 10 years is really got to reevaluate what they consider to be peaceful and proper. You know what I'm saying? But that's not the point. The point being is that Iran and this so-called axis of resistance has been utterly destroyed. Okay. And now will the proxies that are being put in that are pro-Western, right? You have a more pro-Western regime in Iraq. You have Jolani, who I hate, but is working with Trump. Now, I'm not giving him credit for anyone. The man is literally a bloodthirsty terrorist. He's cut people's heads off like he's a disgusting animal. But he's still obviously a US proxy. Right. The US is propping
and
him up.
I think what's happened with Giuliani
Hmm.
is he was a Turkish and or a British proxy working
Hmm.
on their behalf. And then what's happened is that Trump has captured him. No, you work.
Hmm.
Trump, that gangster said, no, you work for me now, not the City of London, not for Erdogan.
Yep.
I think that's right. Now, Halsey, there's something I just want to say, just segue into, if I may, right? Which is
Sure.
the role of the British